99% of you who watch my videos aren't subscribed yet. Once we hit 1,000 subscribers, I'm planning to create some special videos for my subscribers. So if you enjoy what I'm doing and want to be part of this journey, hit that subscribe button. The planet Zalara, nestled within the Andromeda Galaxy, had long been a beacon of peace and prosperity. Under the wise and compassionate rule of King Orion, the Zalarans lived in harmony, their society thriving with advancements in science, art, and spirituality. The royal family was beloved, and Princess Lyra, the king's only daughter, was the crown jewel of their civilization. Her beauty was matched only by her intelligence and fierce determination to protect her people. However, a shadow loomed over Zalara. The Void Plague, a malevolent force of unknown origin, had begun to consume entire star systems. This plague was unlike any disease or war the Zalarans had encountered. It was an entity of pure entropy, devouring the life force of planets, leaving them as cold, barren husks. Zalara, once a vibrant world of shimmering oceans and lush forests, was slowly succumbing to this plague. The royal palace, once filled with laughter and music, now echoed with despair. King Orion, weakened and bedridden, could no longer lead his people. His once bright eyes were dim, and his voice, once commanding and filled with wisdom, was now frail. With his strength fading, the burden of saving Zalara fell upon Princess Lyra's shoulders. She was determined to find a solution, no matter the cost. The ancient oracles of Zalara, mystical beings connected to the cosmic energies of the universe, were consulted. In their cryptic visions, they saw a faint glimmer of hope: Earth, a distant planet in the Milky Way galaxy. The oracles spoke of a human with a unique life force, capable of creating a bond that could counteract the Void Plague. But there was a catch. The energy needed to be transferred through a bond of complete submission. A bond that required the Zalaran royal to surrender herself entirely. Lyra was torn. As a princess, she was trained to lead, to command, not to submit. But as she watched her father slip further into weakness and saw her people lose hope, she knew she had no choice. The survival of her planet depended on her willingness to sacrifice her pride, her dignity, and perhaps even her freedom. With a heavy heart, Lyra bid farewell to her father and her people, promising to return with the means to save them. She boarded her starship, the Eclipse, and set a course for Earth. As the ship sailed through the stars, Lyra steeled herself for what was to come. She would find this human, and she would do whatever it took to save her world, even if it meant becoming a slave. The journey to Earth was long and perilous. Lyra navigated through asteroid fields, avoided pirate traps, and traversed the perilous wormholes that connected distant galaxies. Each challenge tested her resolve, but she pressed on, driven by the image of her dying father and her desolate homeland. Upon entering Earth's atmosphere, Lyra's ship cloaked itself, avoiding detection by human technology. She landed in a remote area, a quiet town nestled in the mountains of a region called the Rockies. It was a stark contrast to the sprawling cities and advanced societies she was accustomed to on Zalara. The town was small, its people leading simple lives, far removed from the complexities of intergalactic politics and advanced technologies. Using the ancient knowledge passed down by the oracles, Lyra was able to sense the presence of the human who could save her people. The energy signature was faint, but it led her to the outskirts of the town, to a modest workshop where the man she sought lived. Jack Thompson was an unassuming man in his early 30s. Tall and muscular, with rugged good looks, he was a man of few words. He lived alone, content with his quiet existence, repairing vehicles and machinery for the townsfolk. His life was simple, but Jack was no stranger to hardship. He had lost his family at a young age and had learned to rely on no one but himself. His solitude was a shield, protecting him from the pain of loss and the unpredictability of the world. As Jack was closing his shop for the evening, a strange feeling washed over him, a sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. That's when he saw her. A figure, cloaked in shimmering fabric, approached him from the shadows. Her presence was otherworldly, her beauty almost ethereal. As she stepped into the light, Jack noticed her eyes, glowing with an intensity that was both captivating and unnerving. "Who are you?" Jack asked, his voice gruff with suspicion. The woman removed her hood, revealing long, flowing silver hair that cascaded down her back. Her skin had a faint iridescence, and her eyes, a striking shade of violet, seemed to pierce into his very soul. "My name is Lyra," she said softly, her voice tinged with desperation. "I am the princess of Zalara, a planet far beyond your solar system. I have come to ask for your help, Jack Thompson." Jack blinked in surprise. "How do you know my name?" "I have traveled across galaxies to find you," Lyra explained. "You possess a unique energy, a life force that can save my world, but to harness it I must bond with you completely. I beg of you, Jack, take me as your slave. It is the only way." Jack recoiled at her words. "Slave? What are you talking about? I don't want a slave, and I sure as hell don't understand how I could save a whole planet." Lyra's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Please, Jack, I wouldn't ask this if it weren't the only way. My people are dying. My father, he's dying. I'll do anything, submit to any command if it means saving them." Jack's heart ached at the sight of her tears, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was all too much to believe. Yet, as he looked into her eyes, he saw something that made him pause. Honesty, desperation, a plea that was impossible to ignore. "All right," Jack said cautiously, "but let's take things slow. I'm not sure I understand everything you're saying, but if there's a way to help, we'll find it together. But I don't want you as a slave. We'll figure something out, okay?" Lyra nodded, a mixture of relief and fear washing over her. "Thank you, Jack. You don't know how much this means to me." Jack allowed Lyra to stay in the small guest room adjacent to his workshop. Over the next few days, they developed a tentative friendship, learning more about each other's worlds. Lyra was fascinated by the simplicity of Earth, the way humans found joy in the little things, despite their limited technology. Jack, in turn, was captivated by Lyra's stories of Zalara, a world of breathtaking beauty and advanced civilizations. But beneath the surface, there was a growing tension. Despite their friendship, the bond that needed to be formed was not one that could be created through mutual respect alone. Lyra knew that time was running out. The energy needed to save her world required her complete submission, a concept that Jack struggled to accept. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lyra stood by the window, staring out at the mountains. She could feel the weight of her world pressing down on her shoulders. Her father's face haunted her dreams, his weakening voice a constant reminder of what was at stake. "Jack," Lyra called out softly, turning to face him. He was sitting at the workbench, tinkering with an old engine. "We need to talk." Jack looked up, sensing the seriousness in her tone. He set down his tools and walked over to her. "What's on your mind?" "We've been trying to form this bond, but it's not working," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can feel it. My father doesn't have much time left. If we don't do this soon, it'll be too late." Jack's brow furrowed in concern. "What are you saying?" Lyra took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm saying that we need to take the final step. I need to fully submit to you. It's the only way to create the energy we need." Jack's eyes widened in shock. "No, Lyra, I can't do that. I don't want you to give up your freedom. There has to be another way." "There isn't," Lyra insisted, tears welling up in her eyes. "I've searched for alternatives, but this is the only way. Please, Jack, I'm begging you. If you care for me, if you care for my people, you'll do this. It's not about power or control. It's about survival. I'm willing to make this sacrifice for my world." Jack stared at her, torn between his principles and the desperate plea of the woman standing before him. He had grown to care for Lyra more than he wanted to admit. The thought of forcing her into submission was abhorrent, but the thought of letting her world die was equally unbearable. Finally, with a heavy heart, Jack nodded. "All right, Lyra. If this is what it takes, I'll do it. But know that I don't want to hurt you. This isn't about control. It's about saving your people." Lyra gave him a sad smile, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you, Jack. I know this is hard for you, but it means everything to me." That night, in the quiet of the workshop, the bond was finally formed. It was a ritual unlike any Jack had ever imagined. Lyra, kneeling before him, offered herself completely, not as a slave, but as a willing participant in a sacred act of survival. Jack, his heart heavy with the weight of responsibility, accepted her submission, not with dominance, but with compassion. As the ritual completed, a surge of energy coursed through them both, powerful and overwhelming. The connection between them deepened, and Jack could feel the life force of Zalara pulsing through him. It was as if he were linked directly to the planet itself, the pain and suffering of its people echoing in his mind. Lyra, though weakened by the process, felt a profound sense of relief. The bond had been formed, and with it, the power to save her world. The following morning, Jack and Lyra set to work on the final stage of their plan. Using the knowledge Lyra had imparted and the energy harnessed through their bond, they constructed a device capable of channeling the life force needed to counteract the Void Plague. It was a daunting task, one that required every ounce of their combined strength and intellect. As they worked, Jack couldn't help but admire Lyra's resilience. Despite everything she had gone through, she remained determined and focused, her love for her people driving her forward. He realized then that she wasn't just a princess, she was a warrior, a leader willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for her world. When the device was finally completed, they activated it, sending a pulse of energy across the galaxy directly to Zalara. The device hummed with power, its vibrations resonating through the air as it channeled the life force into the distant planet. Back on Zalara, the effect was immediate. The Void Plague, which had been consuming the planet for so long, began to retreat. The once barren landscapes started to bloom again, and the Zalarans, who had been on the brink of despair, felt a renewed sense of hope. The energy that Jack and Lyra had created was reversing the damage, restoring life to their dying world. As the device continued to work, Lyra could feel the connection between her and Zalara growing stronger. Her father's life force, once flickering like a dying flame, was reignited. She could sense his strength returning, and with it, the vitality of her people. But the process was not without its cost. The energy transfer was draining, both physically and emotionally. Jack, too, felt the strain, his connection to Zalara taking a toll on his body. But he pushed through, knowing that this was the only way to save Lyra's world. When the transfer was complete, both Jack and Lyra collapsed, exhausted but victorious. The Void Plague had been defeated and Zalara was safe. The bond they had formed had not only saved a planet, but had also created a connection between two beings from different worlds, a connection that transcended the boundaries of space and time. In the days that followed, Lyra began to recover, her strength slowly returning. She and Jack spent their time reflecting on all that had happened, the bond that had been forged through sacrifice and trust. They had accomplished the impossible, and in doing so, had formed a friendship that would endure beyond the stars. As Lyra prepared to return to Zalara, now that her people were safe, she felt a deep sense of gratitude towards Jack. He had not only saved her world, but had also shown her a side of humanity that she had never known: compassion, selflessness, and a willingness to sacrifice for others. On the day of her departure, Jack and Lyra stood on the edge of the forest, overlooking the mountains. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the landscape. "Thank you, Jack," Lyra said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "I will never forget what you've done for me, for my people." Jack smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I'm just glad I could help. Take care of your people, Lyra. And if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." Lyra nodded, her heart heavy as she turned to leave. But before she could take a step, she turned back and embraced Jack, holding him tightly. "Goodbye, Jack. Until we meet again." With that, Lyra boarded her ship and left Earth, her heart full of hope for the future. As she returned to Zalara, she knew that she had not only saved her world, but had also found a lifelong friend in a distant corner of the universe. And as Jack watched her ship disappear into the night sky, he knew that his life would never be the same. He had been part of something extraordinary, something that would stay with him forever. In the vast expanse of space, a bond had been formed, one that would endure long after the stars had faded.